Guten Morgen, meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to our meeting here today, to our seminary of the Liberal Alliance, of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe, in the European Parliament. We are one parliamentary group that is very concerned about the legal standing of the European Union. I'm very happy to see a lot of colleagues here today. We have Renate Weber, our chairwoman in the Committee for Interior Affairs and Civil Liberties, as well as Theodoros Skylakakis, chairman of the ALDE group. Member of the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety Committee, and we're also very happy to see Jan Mulder and Olli Schmidt, because we're going to address a very important topic today towards a European public prosecutor. And I would also like to welcome Andrew Duff, who has been active in this very important political domain for years. We're also very happy that we have highly competent speakers, especially Ikeda Shimita. And the Commission has already made a proposal for a directive to combat fraud against the European Union through the application of criminal law. This is the PIF Directive. And this is being discussed on the legislative process, and we're impatiently awaiting the proposals of the European Commission for the introduction of a European financial public prosecutor that is included in the Lisbon Treaty. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Thomas Dittmann, the Director of the Department for International Criminal Law of the Federal Justice Ministry in Berlin. You are representing the Federal Justice Minister of Miss Leuthauser-Schnarrenberger, who regrettably can't be with us today. And I would like to welcome Mr. Darius Tsylis, the Director of the International Law Department of the Ministry of Justice in Lithuania. So we also have the EU presidency present with us. Both the Parliament and the Council are very important in this, of course. And I would also like to welcome Mr. Frederik Wehrle, head of the Anti-Corruption Division, the Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs of the OECD. Welcome to the European Parliament here in Brussels. Ladies and gentlemen, about 400 to 600 million euros of the EU budget are lost every year to fraud. If you also add irregularities, the sum rises up to 1.2 billion. That's what the experts estimate. For me, as the chairman of the Budget Committee, it's clear that we have to protect the European finances against fraud. This is why I demand, as the chairman of the Budget Committee, Budget Control Committee, that we examine intensely how we could work with a European public prosecutor, how we could organize a better protection of the financial interests of the European Union. So we're talking about combating frauds in transnational cases, border-crossing fake cases. It's very difficult to investigate these cases today. The current discussion is marked by investigations of OLAF, the office that's combating corruption. And despite all the huge successes by OLAF in combating fraud, the legal possibilities of this institution are not comparable to what a European Public Prosecutor could do. And in our committee, we've always complained about the fact that some of the offences have not been brought to trial, have not been committed. And we have also realized that the same kind of offence will be prosecuted differently in different member states. Ladies and gentlemen, Article 86 of the Lisbon Treaty, the legal basis for the establishment of a European prosecution, is the basis for a proposal of the European Commission, or could be this basis, and the Council would, after the agreement of the European Parliament, would unanimously decide that such a thing would be accepted. If there is no possible for unanimity, we'd still need at least 9 member states for reinforced cooperation on the basis of this draft proposal. This will be the question, how this will proceed. Is there a political will to implement these measures? I'm looking forward to see what the experts of this panel will have to say to these points. The domain of the European Public Prosecutor is mostly in combating criminal offences against the financial interests of the Union, but this could also be extended for other transnational or cross-border offences, if necessary, and in those cases where these acts aren't sufficiently prosecuted. There's also the question of the subsidiarity principle, and there are some member states which will closely examine that their own sovereignty won't be affected. So there we have to find the right middle ground between harmonization and respect of the sovereignty and subsidiary principle, and to have the appropriate measures, proportionality. That's where we have to orient ourselves. Now, with this short overview to the content of today's meeting is what I would like to limit myself to, because we have very competent experts for this panel today. This will also be streamed online. So this is a public meeting. We have also interpretation towards French, English, and German, so that we have great possibilities for participation in the discussion. But before I leave the floor to the Commissioner, I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Skylakakis, the MEP in Budgetary Control Committee.
I have a flight at 12 o'clock, so I'm running on a thin line here in terms of time. I'll have to leave after my short presentation. Michael started by saying that we know that 400 to 600 million euro are lost in fraud from the budget. But how much fraud and in general corruption costs the EU financial interest is an issue of great difficulty. We cannot easily measure it, because one way to measure it is to see what we actually manage to get back. The other way to measure it is to look more deeply into how this whole corruption and crime and organized crime affects EU financial interests. For example, if you look at Transparency International's bribe index, where you can measure, I have done that in my thematic paper on corruption, which was adopted also by the Parliament in this specific observation, we see that in the public sector of the member states, 27 member states, we have each year at least 20 million bribes. I repeat, in the public sector of the member states, we have each year at least 20 million bribes. These people tell us that they have bribed. In market research, in polls, they tell us that they have bribed. Of course, obviously the bribes are more than that, and this only covers the small bribes, because the big bribes nobody's going to discuss about. And out of them, I'll give you only one example, 600,000 go to customs officers. 600,000 bribes per year. Small bribes, obviously, but this also gives you the extent of what's going on. The extent of what's going on is huge. And this does not include the bigger bribes, the bigger cases. Now, are we effective in fighting this problem? The reality is that we are not effective. I will give you only the Olaf example. We have 10 years of Olaf. About 600 cases were sent during that time to the member states. Out of them, half were not prosecuted, and out of them, half did not, from the half that were prosecuted, only half ended up in successful prosecutions. So essentially, if you measure the extent of the problem and the results at one very limited agency that we have had, they are quite small, because one cannot imagine that all this bribing that goes on in the public sector of the member states does not affect EU financial interests, in spite of all our efforts. Now, also this does not include, of course, any aspect of cross-border bribes, where the opportunity to prosecute is almost non-existent. Being from Greece, I have a few cases in mind, but I won't bring them up here today, where cross-border bribe prosecution was hopeless. And there was also no political will for that. Now, all this, which includes corruption, but also a lot of that stands for organized crime, has a very important economic dimension. We are moving towards a fiscal union. We already have a malfunctioning economic and monetary union. And we are moving towards a fiscal and banking union. And what we know from economic and monetary unions, and it also stands for fiscal unions, is that when you have in the same union very different levels of institutional functioning, when you have very different levels of corruption, then the areas where high corruption and institutional malfunctioning exist, in these areas you have a chronic disability of the economic system. And you can see that today as the economic and monetary union is in deep trouble. And if we only move towards this fiscal and banking union together with that, and we don't do nothing about what I would call an anti-corruption and anti-crime union, then in the end, where you will end is a malfunctioning union in its whole. One should look at it also in the long run. We have to be competitive globally. And what is our main advantage? Is it that we have capitalism, the market system? We are no longer alone having capitalism as a weapon for global competition. Since 20 years, a lot of other people, the Chinese, the Indians, are using the same system. Is it knowledge? Now with the internet, knowledge that we had, precious knowledge where we were competitive 20 years ago, we can no longer keep it to ourselves. It's 3 clicks away in the middle of Africa to the best knowledge in the world. So our main competitive advantage is our institutions and our good governance. And today, in modern economics, we know that institutions and good governance are totally essential for competitiveness. And we can also see it in places where institutions function well. We are very, very strong economically. And in places where institutions malfunction, though we have people, we have knowledge, we have infrastructure, the system is not working. And you can see it in this crisis as well. So we need also for a global competitiveness to achieve a much higher level of institutional functioning in Europe. And you cannot do that when you have huge parts of the continent immersed into corruption and being destroyed in smaller societies by organized crime. So we need a much stronger response in terms of our institutions at the center. And this can be done through the efforts of the Commission. And I have to say that though I'm very critical to the Commission in many other instances, I have to say that in this case, in the case of corruption and the creation of new functions and new ways to fight it in the community level, it has been very, very active in the last couple of years. And I have to accept that, and the European Public Prosecutor will be the most important part of this effort. Today, when you look at Olaf cannot even open a bank account. When the local authorities don't want to cooperate, Olaf is totally dysfunctional. Is it possible that local authorities, judicial, won't cooperate in cases of corruption? It is possible, totally possible. It happens all the time. So we need the European Public Prosecutor. We desperately need it if we are going to have European financial interests protected. And this is most important as we go towards the next European elections, because we have Euroscepticism both in the north and in the south. And the real reason for Euroscepticism is the fact that people are not happy with how we spend European money. They are not happy in the north or in the western north because they feel that their money is not spent well, and they are not happy in the south because, and in the east, because they feel that their own political systems have not been spending money well. So there is a connection all over Europe to improve in this sector and to improve in a big way. And the effort for the European Public Prosecutor, which I hope will be able to push forward within this term or in the beginning of the next, is extremely important to achieve that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Theodoros. Thank you very much, Theodoros, for this passionate plaidoyer for a better fight against fraud and for a better spending of EU funding. And you mentioned that the Commission made some very interesting proposals, as I mentioned in my introductory remarks, the PIF Directive, and we are urgently waiting, Mr. Commissioner, for the announced proposal for a European Public Prosecutor. Thank you, Theodoros. I think you have to leave. Good flight to you. And I now give way to Commissioner Šemeta for his speech, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Toyer for organizing this seminar on the protection of the Union's financial interests and the setting up of a European Public Prosecutor's Office. In particular, with a view to this latter initiative, this seminar is very timely. In fact, our proposal is scheduled to be adopted by the College next week. I hope that this seminar will raise your interest in this important project and help to give you some more background on it. But before going into some more detail on the EPPO, let me first turn to the so-called PIF Directive that we proposed already in summer last year. The current considerable differences in the level of protection of the EU budget in the member states pose a serious problem. These differences concern both the definition of and the sanctions for the offences affecting the Union's financial interests. Furthermore, sometimes very short periods of statutory limitation can lead to crimes being time-barred before complex cross-border investigations can be concluded. The Commission therefore pursued three main objectives when it proposed the PIF Directive last year. Our first objective was to better define offences affecting the EU's financial interests. This was to ensure that we cover a sufficiently broad range of criminal behaviour with this directive. Secondly, we considered it necessary to establish minimum sanctions for these offences in order to provide for equivalent, proportionate, but also sufficiently deterrent sanctions throughout the EU. And thirdly, we wanted to extend the statutory limitation in order to make sure that investigators and prosecutors have enough time to carry out complex cross-border investigations. In the discussions in the Council so far, however, these objectives unfortunately have not been fully reflected. Instead, the Council general approach, adopted in June, has watered down the Commission's proposal considerably. It not only stays below the level of ambition of the Commission proposal, it even threatens the existing acquis in the area of the protection of the Union's financial interests. Let me give you only three examples. Firstly, contrary to what is in the situation today, the Council would like to exclude VAT fraud from the directive. However, the jurisprudence of the Court of Justice is very clear on the fact that VAT is part of the EU financial interests. Secondly, the Council does not want to maintain a minimum threshold as of which an offence against the EU's financial interests has to be considered as serious. It would therefore in future be entirely within the discretion of the Member States to decide for which crimes they impose stricter sanctions. And thirdly, Council wants to base the directive on Article 83, a provision in Title 5 of the Treaty, instead of Article 325, which is the anti-fraud article. This means that Denmark will not participate in the directive, and the UK and Ireland will have the possibility to opt out. We would therefore, in future, not only have a different transposition of EU rules in the different member states, but even different EU rules applying within the EU. In an area where we are trying to protect a European common good, the EU budget, this seems difficult to accept. Not surprisingly, the general approach is also not in favor of the more innovative elements of the Commission proposal. This means that it neither approves of the idea of minimum sanctions for serious fraud cases, nor of minimum periods of statutory limitations. The European Parliament still needs to position itself on the Commission proposal. I hope the Parliament, in its discussions, will take a strong stance in favor of effective rules that ensure an equivalent protection of EU taxpayers' money throughout the EU. This is even more important as the outcome of these negotiations will also have an effect on the future setting up of a European Public Prosecutor's Office. This proposal on the establishment of the so-called EPPO will be submitted next week to the College of Commissioners by my colleague, Vice President Reding, and me. The EPPO will be a new independent EU body which will be competent for investigating and prosecuting offences of fraud as defined by the PIF Directive. Its mandate will focus exclusively on the protection of the financial interests of the EU taxpayers. Now, you might wonder why we think we need a new authority in times where public budgets are tight, in times where we are rather cutting down on our administrations. The reason is that the EPPO will fill a gap in the protection of the EU budget. And we actually intend to fill that gap without any substantial new resources. The current system of mutual legal assistance in criminal matters has grown over the years and produces concrete results. However, for cases that by their nature are European and regularly include a cross-border element, this system is not sufficient. It is too burdensome, too slow, and relies too much on the goodwill of the persons involved. The EPPO is our answer to this problem. Let me just set out 4 considerations that in our view are essential in this context. Firstly, there is no doubt that the work that OLAF does in preventing and detecting fraud is crucial. However, it only has the mandate to carry out administrative investigations. For the prosecution stage, it has to rely on the judicial authorities of the member states. In this respect, OLAF reports have constantly shown that the follow-up to its cases in many member states remains low. Even its reformed states, OLAF will not be able to solve this problem. Therefore, we need a European body that can bring cases to court in all member states. Our proposal will build on OLAF's and Eurojust's experience in dealing with fraud affecting the Union's financial interests. It will also ensure the maximum synergies. This includes attributing some of the resources of OLAF and Eurojust to the EPPO in accordance with the new distribution of tasks. Secondly, the fact that we want one single competent authority does not mean that we have to upset member states' judicial systems. These judicial systems often have long traditions. We think that the most reasonable approach is to integrate this body seamlessly in the national judicial systems. Much of the EPPO's work on the ground should therefore be carried out by double-hatted European delegated prosecutors. They will be prosecutors who are rooted in the national system, but they will act under the instructions of the European Public Prosecutor in cases affecting the EU financial interests. The European Public Prosecutor himself should be supported in his work by a central office. This office will also provide the link between the delegated prosecutors in the different member states. Thirdly, the EPPO will need to be able to employ in all member states a sufficient range of measures to investigate fraud. And the result of these measures has to be valid in all member states. This means, in particular, that evidence collected in member state A can be used before the courts in member state B. At the same time, the EPPO's exercise of investigative powers must obviously be accompanied by a system of judicial review. And we need appropriate measures to safeguard the rights of suspected persons, witnesses, and victims. Also, in this respect, we do not intend to intrude unnecessarily in member states' legal systems. Therefore, we do not want to create new, comprehensive procedural rules at EU level. Instead, the execution of the investigative measures should follow national law. This is both in the interest of the national courts that can apply the law that they are familiar with and in the interest of the persons concerned. The fourth and the last consideration that I would like to highlight concerns the status of the EPPO. In order to ensure that it can work effectively, the EPPO has to be independent in prosecuting the crimes within its competence. This means independence from member states, from the institutions, and of course from third parties. At the same time, the EPPO should of course be accountable to the legislator for its overall activity. Let me conclude. If we want to fight fraud effectively, we need a body that attaches high priority to its prosecution, no matter where in the Union it takes place. The EPPO is necessary to achieve the objectives of an effective, equivalent, and deterrent protection. Over the last 1.5 years, the Commission services have carried out substantial preparatory work, including broad consultations with stakeholders. The proposal that the Commission should adopt next week is based on a comprehensive impact assessment, which clearly shows the added value of such a body. I therefore hope that our proposal will meet with the necessary support from the Member States and the European Parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner, for presenting us your views on the PIF Directive and also giving us an insight on the proposal of the European Commission on the European Public Prosecutor. We estimate your being here and giving us these informations, as we know that it is always a crucial time just before taking the decision in the college. It would be now a pleasure to go directly into the discussion, and we will start this discussion with our distinguished experts and guests we invited to our panel here. Und ich darf an dieser Stelle
And at this point, I would like to switch to English and mention the experts that we have here today and ask them to give us their opinions. First of all, I would like to ask Mr. Thomas Dittmann from the Criminal Law Director at the Federal Ministry of Justice in Berlin. I would like to pass him the floor.
For this meeting, but there are
at what time?
actually already now.
Okay.
But there are experts from my team who are here and will be more than happy to answer any questions and to participate in the discussion on this very important subject. And I wish you a very fruitful seminar today.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, so I would like to ask whether Renate Weber or Andrew Duff want to put a question directly to Mr. Šemeta, if you like, because he has to leave. Andrew.
Could I just seek to clarify the question of judicial review of the work of the prosecutor? What precisely is going to be the scope of the judicial authority of the European Court?
Probably I'm a bit difficult situation because we are still in the last preparatory stage of the proposal, and I cannot go into every detail of the proposal. But the European Court of Justice will play a very important role in the judicial review procedure, but I cannot disclose particularly how this will take place, but that is foreseen in the proposal.
Thank you very much. And Renate.
Yes, thank you very much. Two very brief questions. One relates to the selection of the European Public Prosecutor. Who will select this person, he or she? And the second question relates to the kind of trainings that I guess it will be provided for the national staff, the prosecutors acting as European prosecutors, but will be from national authorities. Who will be in charge with this kind of training?
Once again, regarding the appointment of the European Public Prosecutor, I can say that we foresee the involvement of the institutions in the procedure, both the European Parliament and the Council. Into that procedure, and I also mentioned in my introduction about accountability of the public prosecutor, and the office itself will be subject for discharge by the Cont Committee, so as any other body in European Union. But the concrete appointment procedure is still subject for collegial approval of the commissioners. Then regarding the training, well, of course, here it's important to take into account that our intention is actually to create this body by using existing resources of Olaf and by using existing resources of Eurojust, and also, of course, their expertise in this area. And of course, we consider that the European Public Prosecutor, with his central office, will be capable also to provide necessary training for so-called double-hatted public prosecutors in the member states. And of course, I fully agree that this training is necessary because for them it will be very important to familiarize also with the rules and with the European law, and that is foreseen actually in the upcoming legislation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Commissioner. One last question, that's possible?
Before leaving, Mr. Commissioner, could you comment on Mr. Skilakakis' rather harsh criticism on Olaf?
Well, I don't think that he expressed critics on Olaf. He expressed that Olaf cannot do everything what is necessary in order to address problems of corruption and other kind of, and also various cases of fraud. And that's true that we have to understand that Olaf is making administrative investigations and is limited in the scope of its instruments, what it can do and what it cannot do. And this is one of the obstacles in order to really achieve the efficient investigation of criminal activities. Because when it comes to the criminal case, the Olaf has to submit the case to the national authorities, and national authorities then continue the criminal investigation, and sometimes they, according to the present system, actually sometimes they even have to repeatedly collect the same evidence which was already collected by Olaf during this investigation, and that also creates sort of inefficiency in the process. With the establishment of European Public Prosecutor, we'll have completely new situation where the European Public Prosecutor and national delegated prosecutors, they will, from the very beginning, if there is suspicion that the case involves criminal activity, this case will be immediately submitted to the European Public Prosecutor with a lot of powers and a lot of instruments in terms of investigating criminal activities, and that will change the situation and will improve significantly the possibility to really to address this problem. And that's what is, I think, we badly need. But at the same time, we have to be realistic that probably it would be difficult to expect to change the entire procedural system in the European Union, and that is why we intend to propose to rely very much on the national systems, but with a strong involvement of European public prosecutor. And what is very important, and what I stated also in my introduction, that we intend to propose that evidence collected in one member state should be recognized by the courts in all other member states. For example, if the crime includes 5 member states and evidence collected in one, then will be possible to present to another member state, and that should be recognized by that member state. This is very important, I think, in terms of efficiency of criminal investigations.
Okay, thank you very much. We estimate that you stood a little bit longer. The shortcomings of Olaf, we suggested, Jan Mulder, on behalf of the ALDE group, that we create a group of wise men investigating the cases we just discussed in committee. We hope that we could find in the Commission support for that idea. But it is quite clear that in between of the construction of Olaf and on the legal basis we have now, we cannot solve all the problems you have just raised, and it makes sense, it's sensitive to go the next step, which means to introduce a European public prosecutor, and that opens interesting and very difficult questions of mutual recognition and the question how far shall the harmonization of the legal basis go. Thank you very much for taking the time. Yes, please.
Just last comment on Olaf. Just for your information, that with the proposal on EPPO, we will present a package of documents, and this package will include also the communication for the future improvements in the legal framework of Olaf. And on this basis, I think that we will then be able to discuss with the Parliament, with the Council, with the stakeholders, what will be the best way to further improve the legal framework of Olaf, particularly taking into account that the proposal on EPPO will be discussed in parallel in both institutions.
We will investigate the proposals of the Commission, but it is for sure that the ALDE group is calling for an investigation, and we are looking forward to the proposals in the package, because we think that there is a substance for improvements in the current Olaf and in the legal framework. Thank you very much for coming here.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay. Now we are in a very interesting, right in the middle, in a very interesting discussion here on European level. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Dittmann. Herr Dittmann, aus Sicht der Mitgliedstaaten.
Mr. Dittmann, from point of view of the member states, of course, there's a series of questions. The Minister, Federal Minister of Justice at the in the occasion of a conference has already given her position on this topic, and if I remember correctly, then she said that also the federal government is interested in a reasonable compromise on a European level, and we're very, very interested in your position. Thank you very much, Mr. President. First of all, I would like to bring you the heartfelt greetings of our Federal Minister Schnarrenberger, who has been working with a lot of interest on this topic. You've already mentioned it, Mr. President, that there was recently a conference in the fourth quarter last year in Berlin, and this had been organized by Olaf mainly. And Mrs. Leuthäuser-Schnarrenberger has spoken on behalf of the federal government, giving a clear statement on this topic, saying that the introduction of a European public prosecution service would actually be approved and welcomed. And she also took into account that this would include a step. Sorry if I'm just limiting myself on criminal law here, a step that has not been done so far in the past, because we have currently only been working with the recognition procedure when there was a judicial decision in one member state, then the other member state had to accept or not accept this decision. And of course, you all know about proportionality, etc. There's a huge discussion going on, not last but least also as far as the European arrest warrant is concerned. Now, something is planned, something new, which is that the state gives some of his powers to another institution. This means that we're talking about classical national statal power, which is the activity of investigation and of prosecution, which is given to another level. And in Germany, this is something that we actually envisage. And we think that so far this has not been done. And this is why we are actually welcoming it. We are taking part in this process, but we do not want to obtain fast, swift compromise solutions. Everything must be really discussed in detail. And if we are under pressure because of deadlines and discussing things in a swift way just to discuss them in time, I think the topic is rather too sensitive to do that. I don't want to criticize the draft that we have not seen in written yet, but I would like to go another way, to take another direction. I would rather give you some of the tendencies, the trends that I have been hearing about, and I would like to thank the European Commission for taking the road it has taken. And I think we all should thank the European Commission for the support it has been given together with Olaf and working together in close cooperation with Olaf in a way that allows us that we can have a draft in these next few days and these next few weeks. I would like to draw your attention on this cooperation with Olaf. I would like to draw your attention on another topic which is important for us in Germany, which is the legality principle, meaning that not opportunity procedure underlies the fact whether a justice service, justice authority wants to start investigation. As far as I understood it, it is not possible to just look away and to just ignore a fact that is brought to an authority, but it has to investigate. It has the obligation to investigate. And I think for the sake of credibility, this is really to be welcomed. Then there's another very important task, especially our Minister of Justice has been supporting this, and that's the fact that the task is to actually try to get to the truth. And even when you have a wrong suspect, you have to try to find the right suspect and to let the wrong suspect go. So this is very important for us. We should not only collect evidence which is inculpating, but we have also to try to really find the truth behind each case. And the model that was proposed, where the deputy European public prosecutors in the national systems are acting under the European public prosecutor, we do think that this is very reasonable. We also think that it's good to root this new function of the EPPO in the national systems. And the problem that has been already mentioned today of the recognition of evidence in other member states is a problem that will need to be discussed and investigated in depth. Of course, there will be other questions that will be coming up during the procedure, and these will be independent from the structure that I will speak about later. However, I would like to mention that, of course, we will need to be very careful, especially as far as cross-border cases are concerned. It will be important to find out what forum is in charge for every case. I would like to start by mentioning an example. For example, there's a Dutch person having a company in Germany. He is living in Mallorca, but the bribes they carried out, well, this was done in Belgium. Of course, we could also speak about multinational companies, and the case would even be more complex. This is a very complex scenario. I think that we will have success in finding out how to deal with it, but of course we have to be very careful. Then there are mixed cases. There can be mixed cases. For example, one of the examples I would like to mention would be rigging of financial support and fraud of certificates, which are a complex case. And there could be also other mixed cases with several different scenarios where we think complexity does not mean that we will not be able to deal with it, but I would like to draw your attention on the fact that we have to find a way how to deal with them. Also, legal aid. There are, of course, countries that have different systems, and there are third parties which are involved. All of these are very sensitive issues. As far as the structure and the organization is concerned, the German federal government is inclined to, well, let's say, to make use of a system developed by Eurojust, which is from the roots up, not a system top-down, but I think, of course, there cannot be just a group of member states imposing a decision on the single member states. Of course, we also have to see what will be feasible for a single member state, such as Germany. We thus need, in the end, an organization that will do things better as what has been done by the single member state so far. And this is our objective, the objective of Germany, and we will do everything in our that is possible for us in order to achieve it.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dittmann, for the statements of the Federal Justice Ministry of Germany at this point about EPPO. And I would also like to give the floor now to our colleague, Madam Weber, Renate Weber.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you very much for organizing these very interesting discussions and for inviting me to take part. I think that indeed we are, or we should be, in fact, appalled with the level of the money that is spent on various types of corruption activities, and with the fact that they are not properly prosecuted and sanctioned. And more it seems that there is a perception, at least among the citizens, and perception sometimes, you know, it's more important than the reality itself. There is a perception among the citizens that the tolerance regarding corruption, it's so big that it is in fact unbearable, and explains to a very large extent also the lack of trust in the political representation of the citizens, and also in the European institutions. So I think indeed it is time to move. In my opinion, it is very much also, or it should be also perceived as a sign of solidarity among the member states if we indeed achieve to do something. And I will explain, I will try to explain at least why I see it from this perspective. During the last mandate in 2008-2009, I was the rapporteur on the revision of the Eurojust directive. And at that time, the discussions were in fact about the possibility of Eurojust to become the next European prosecutor. It not only turned out that that was not possible, but please be aware of the fact that as a matter of continuity, at the beginning I was also the rapporteur for the new directive amending Eurojust. I'm sorry, but we are actually ending this mandate, and the Commission will not come with a new revision. And it will not come simply because it knows very well that there is no consensus among the member states, and after all, maybe in some occasions it's worth not to try to do something as long as you know that it will not be accepted. But with the current situation, with frauds against the EU or other types, all types of activities affecting the EU financial interests, I can give you some figures, but these days, you know, everything is based on leaks. So these are leaks from the Commission, which still do not have official figures. It's not only Snowden or, I don't know, WikiLeaks coming with the leaks. Also from the Commission we can have some. But it is very interesting, honestly, to see that, for example, the percentage of prosecuting and sanctioning various types of behaviors against the EU financial interest range between 19% to 90%. Well, that's a difference. Maybe it's easier when it's with the 90 because it's one or two cases, and if they are properly and immediately sanctioned, then you do have the high percentage, but nevertheless, it's not admissible. If we are a European Union where member states together are not just a gathering of governments, but we are all together in this. So something must be changed, and I certainly welcome the fact that the European Commission wants to come over the summer, I understand, with the proposal. Because in this moment what happens is that, of course, in each and every state, every member state, depending on the national legislation, some activities will be prosecuted, investigated, prosecuted, and sanctioned, regardless of who is the victim, the EU or, I don't know, national budget or whatever. But this depends very much also on the practices in every country, on the criminal legislation in every country, and of course of the efficiency of the judiciary in every country, which is also something extremely important to bear in mind. But this is why you have the same activities which in some countries are sanctioned by fines, in other by pretty tough prison sentences, and in some countries are not at all considered crimes. And this is also something that needs to be changed. As it was just said, of course, under such circumstances, criminals also have the possibility to choose wherever to be prosecuted, they can move around, you will always find procedural ways to deal with this as to be in your interest. And this is not something that we necessarily need to not to understand. I mean, as long as the legislation allows for this, it's understandable that criminals and their legal representation, I myself was a lawyer my entire life, a defense attorney, so it's normal to do this. This is why, of course, with the new, and I really have not seen the proposal of the Commission. If it is finalized on its way, I don't know how it will change from what the Commissioner just told us today. But I'd like to spend indeed a little bit of time to look into the possible problems and questions that I see. Well, first of all, in my view, there is no way, even if it will be sent to the Parliament before the end of this summer, so when we come back it will be on our tables, there is no way that it will be adopted during this mandate. And I'm telling you this simply bearing in mind my own personal experience following some of the other dossiers that were dealt with during this mandate. Right to interpretation, access to lawyer. They took us more than 2 years and a half of negotiations, of very, very, very tough negotiations. How can we believe that we could solve this in a couple of months? That's not going to be possible. And let me explain why I think it is not going to be possible to do it so quickly. If we look at the substance of, it's obvious that we need a sort of criminal law, anyway, criminal penalties, yes, at the European level. We need clear definitions. But then, let me ask you this. Is it morally? Legally, everything is possible. I mean, what is legal is not always moral. But is it morally possible to have the same behavior of a human being or of a company be sanctioned if it is against the EU financial interest but not be sanctioned in a member state? If something is considered a bribe, but it's not everywhere a bribe. There are countries with that practice of the commission, 10% commission, whatever. In my country, for this, you go to prison up to 13 years. In other countries, it's considered tradition. I'm sorry, but we have a problem. Can we then sanction this when it happens because the EU is involved? I think with the discussions that will take place, we will have to move somehow more towards at least a harmonization of views on some corruptive activities among the member states. Because I see it is a problem, and I see it will be a problem during the negotiations. It will be raised. I know how my colleagues in the LIBE committee speak about this, and I know also about the Council. And of course, you can have a set of definitions and clear, and I think that's not so difficult to deal with in the end. But of course, then it comes the procedural aspects. And in fact, procedural aspects relate very much to fundamental rights of the suspect and of the accused. And here, I think it will be also complicated. I'm not saying that all these things are not possible to be overcome, but I'm saying why I guess the negotiations will take quite a long time. Because indeed, the way the Commission comes with the idea of having the public prosecutor, to me it makes sense. You cannot have a new different body. I think it is okay to have a centralized body and then to work at the level of the 28, and it must be 28. If not all 28, then I'm sorry, that's going to be a joke. So you need to have at the level of the 28 member states local European public prosecutors. it really makes sense. And it's not impossible. And of course, it makes sense to work with the local law enforcement. And it's not difficult to come with, indeed, this is why I asked the question, to come indeed with a sort of training, as it is possible today also with Eurojust, and people to come with similar approaches, so to act in a similar way. But then my question is, if this is the case, what will be the procedural penal legislation to be applied? If we come with something that is at the European level, then it will be in collision with the national legislation, that is for sure. In some countries, I have no doubt. Not even with the minimum standards that we do have in this moment, because we have worked on some, because still in some countries you have more than just the minimum standards. And there will always be the right of the accused to enjoy a better protection. And then it's about all the other aspects that they were just raised: legal aid, access to lawyer, time of pretrial detention, collecting the evidence. Oh, what a wonderful aspect. In my country, for example, we do have a legislation where, in fact, the intelligence service recording or intercepting communication related to terrorist activities, although they do not have in the end anything as an outcome on terrorist activities, you can use the same recording for combating serious crimes. Okay, I just heard as, in other countries that would not be admissible at all. So that it will be very, but you know, bearing in mind this, I always have to say, but my country is perceived as being the most corrupted. I have my doubts about this, I have to say. And also about how we proceed on prosecuting and doing some things. But all these things will definitely be discussed also by us as European parliamentarians and also by the member states in the Council. Conflict of jurisdiction, of course, has to be properly addressed. But also, let's assume that all these will go away. Still will be something else which cannot be dealt with at the level of the European Union, including the sanctions as such. There is a tradition in every member state about how they sanction. You do have countries where for murder, to take something very obvious, a school example, you put people in prison for 30 years or more, and you have countries where for something, the same thing actually, and under same circumstances, you put them in prison for 20 years. Well, it's a difference. And you cannot train judges in this respect. I think that this independence will be preserved. So what I'm trying to say is that it will take a lot of effort. This is why I'm also talking about solidarity. If indeed there is solidarity among the member states, I think that a good outcome can be identified and really to do something about this horrible thing, which is corruption. If member states will want to invoke their own legal traditions, and these are very conservative traditions, believe me, then it will take us quite a lot of time to come with something which has been for the first time designed like 12 years ago. Yeah, in 2001 was the first initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Renate. Thank you very much, Renate, for giving us an insight in your work and also raising decisive questions. Before I open a general discussion for questions and statements, we have two more distinguished speakers and experts. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Darius Silis. He is Director of International Law, International Law Department of the Ministry of Justice of the current European Presidency, Lithuania. Welcome. It is great that you are here, Mr. Silis. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the Parliament, ladies and gentlemen. I, of course, heard the already mentioned the congratulations and words of thanks for the organizers of this event and Michael Thurer for having us here and discussing this very important topic. And I'm in particular grateful to providing Lithuanian presidency opportunity to exchange our view and our way of thinking on this topic. As you all know, it was only last week when Lithuania took a helm of the Council in the European Union from Ireland. And just very recently, in the beginning of this week, my Minister of Justice, presented the priorities of the presidency in the committees of the European Parliament in Juri and Libe. So we'll take the possibility and opportunity to reiterate what my Minister has said and to reiterate that one of the prevailing goals during our presidency will be creation of credible Europe with sound public finances and efficient economic governance of the Union. To this end, in the area of criminal justice, presidency will focus on strengthening of the protection of the Union's financial interests. Of course, somebody will probably ask itself, what does exactly mean the financial interests of the EU? And I think we have to remember that the discussions on the ways and means to strengthen the protection of the EU financial interests have already been going for decades. I think not long time ago, not long after the adoption of the conventions for the protection of the financial interests of communities in the mid-90s, the project called Corpus Juris has been launched. And the experts from member states and academia from various member states of the European Union at that time, and also the acceding countries, have been working together to propose solutions how to strengthen control over the Union's finances. And then at that project, the notion of European Public Prosecutor has been mentioned. As well, of course, some other interesting proposals have been made to strengthen the protection of the EU finances. So I think today we're kind of facing and witnessing the implementation of Corpus Juris. During the Irish presidency, the Council have intensively discussed the directive on the protection of EU financial interests by criminal law. After intensive and difficult negotiation, the Council has reached a general approach on the Commission proposal. And of course, someone might contravene as far as the content is concerned, but that's the Council position at this time. In any case, our presidency is ready and keen of having start discussions with the European Parliament on this important directive as soon as Parliament is ready. The agreement on PIF Directive, however, leaves open the questions of other interlinked offences that will be connected with the PIF Directive, such as money laundering, euro counterfeiting, and how we shall deal with them. Moreover, the question concerning the interrelated crimes to commit PIF offences, for instance, forgery of documents, also will need to be raised. And the question here is whether how they should be prosecuted. Should they be also the competence of the future proposal of EPPO, which we already have been heard will be presented next week, or it should be left to national authorities to deal with them. So all those questions will need to be addressed in the course of negotiations. And as regards the European Public Prosecutor Office, I would like to know that as soon as it is adopted, and that will be one of the priorities for the Lithuanian presidency. The presidency supports Commission endeavours in fight against offences affecting Union financial interests. And the establishment of the European Public Prosecutor Office is foreseen in the treaty on the functioning of the European Union, and I think we should use and seize this opportunity. Nevertheless, new EU body must bring real added value, not only when it comes to safeguarding EU financial interests, but also to the work of national prosecutors. Furthermore, as the Presidency of the Council of the EU, we respect the interests of the majority of the Member States and seek to ensure that negotiations on this very important issue were conducted comprehensively. We consider that in the view of pursuing for substantive support, sufficient period of time should be devoted to deliberate upon all aspects related to the question at stake, and also including at expert level. It is of ultimate importance that a Member State could express their views on different aspects of the establishment and functioning of this institution. And we should find out a way how to bring together greatly varying national prosecution systems and work in synergetic manner towards the common goal without superfluously interfering with sovereignty of the Member States. I think the due regard should be given to practical cooperation of future proposed EPPO at national level, as that has been noted in the meeting of Consultative Forum of the Prosecutors General and Directors of the Public Prosecution of the Member States organized by Eurojust earlier this year. And it is obvious that establishment of European Public Prosecutor is a complex issue and requires and will require deep analysis. The Presidency will do its best to make sufficient progress on this dossier. It is likely that we will have a legislative deliberation on EPPO in the GHA Council in October. However, besides that, I would like to, on behalf of the Presidency, to inform you that on the 16th and 17th September, Presidency, in cooperation with the European Commission and Academy of European Law, will hold a conference on this important topic, and that will be the first possibility to assess the legal framework of the proposal. So in the conference, it will be dealing with the aspects of EPPO functions, competence, architecture of the proposal, whether it should be centralized or decentralized, procedural framework concerning the powers to collect evidence, investigative power, and also judicial review, as well as procedural rights of accused and suspected persons. Of course, the basis for the discussions will be the Commission proposal. So to summarize, we do need new efficient means to fight perpetrators of and compliances or offences against EU financial interests. But they have to be well elaborated, and due course of time must be given for discussions upon the text of the forthcoming proposal of the establishment of EPPO. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silis, for giving us an insight on the plans of the Lithuanian presidency as well. Indeed, that is of interest, what you just told us on the 16th and 17th of September. And indeed, we are looking forward to a close investigation period. Now I would like to turn to our last speaker on the panel before I open the general discussion. Some weeks ago, I had the opportunity to talk to the Vice General Secretary of the OECD, the former Belgian Prime Minister Yves Le Terme. In that discussion, we discovered that the OECD is offering a wide range of expertise in setting standards in the fight against fraud and the protection of financial interests. We also recognized, or I also recognized, that the European Union is not yet a member of the OECD, and the European Union does not yet accept a OECD monitoring, so that would be another idea we could discuss, and that is a track I will follow, but that is not the topic today. I would now like to give the floor to the representative of the OECD. Welcome to Mr. Frédéric Wehrle, head of the Anti-Corruption Division, Directorate for Financial and Enterprise Affairs. Je donne la parole à vous, Monsieur Wehrle. Bienvenue à Bruxelles.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Theurer, et
Thank you very much, Mr. Theurer, and thank you for inviting me to take part to this seminar. This meeting is really interesting and also quite important. and thank you for mentioning the expertise and the work that has already been done at the OECD. As we said at the beginning of this meeting this morning, corruption is a plague, and it damages public governance. It also damages European institutions and European citizens and citizens in general. And we started many years ago, and we have developed a comprehensive strategy, because we consider that if we want to fight corruption efficiently, we needed to do that from different points of view. And I would like, if you allow me, to sum up the strategy. And the strategy is based on 4 pillars. The first is to foster policies in our member states in order to have healthy governance systems. I mean, a good public policy, transparency in the management of public funds. That is the first pillar. The second pillar is related to preventing corruption. And at the OECD, we've developed a series of tools. There are recommendations in order to protect the integrity of the public sector, of public market, and the integrity and transparency of lobbying activities. The third pillar is detection. That's a point that has already been mentioned. If we want to fight corruption and fraud efficiently, we need tools to detect corruption cases. So in terms of detection, we are working on 2 main aspects. The first is related to fiscal authorities, because at the national level they can play a very important part in detecting flows of money related to fraud or corruption, and the other is to develop mechanisms aiming at protecting those people who can alert us, inform us of corruption cases, so that these people can get in touch with the competent authorities to let them know about these corruption cases. And the last pillar is the criminalization of the corruption of public, national and international officers. I work in the Secretariat. I'm not the head of the anti-corruption division. I'm here to talk on behalf of my head of department, but I work at the Secretariat that supports the implementation of our standards on the criminalization of corruption of national and international officers.
We want to criminalize the fact that some foreign officers would receive money in exchange of a market or in order to win a public procurement. So we aim at active corruption. And if I am a representative of a French business, a French company, and I get in touch with a European person and I want to bribe the person, I do it. Well, the convention tackles this type of problems. And I talk about it because within this convention, well, the idea was to create a follow-up mechanism, a very serious mechanism, in order to check if the states signing the convention do apply the different aspects included in the document. The follow-up process consists of examining the different policies implemented by the 40 states signing the convention. Why do I mention the follow-up? Well, this process enabled us to gather a lot of information about the difficulties, the barriers of the countries related to investigations and an efficient approach of cross-border corruption. Today, I'd like to discuss 2 points with you, and I think they could be relevant within our discussion and our debate today related to European Public Prosecutor. First aspect, and it has been tackled several times this morning, the problem of the judicial cooperation at the international level. And the second aspect I will then deal with is the role of the prosecutor and the means that are necessary within these cases of cross-border corruption. First of all, so for this cooperation at the international level, our assessments have demonstrated that one of the main barriers to an efficient investigation within a case of corruption at the cross-border level is judicial cooperation between the different authorities of the different states and countries. This is due to different rules applied in the different countries. It is due to the different approaches of the different states. And even though there were initiatives at the international level, at the European level, in order to facilitate this cooperation between the member states, we have to face the fact today that one of the main obstacles to an efficient investigation when there are cross-border crimes, well, is a lack of cooperation. And this has a lot of consequences, of course, because it can lead, in some cases, to the end of the investigation. So people give up, or sometimes the investigation is less important because there are problems at the national level. This morning, we also said that some investigations could sometimes be interrupted, for example, because of deadlines. That's one of the main obstacles, and we have made recommendations in our working group Anti-Fraud and Corruption within the OECD. And the idea of a European Public Prosecutor, or the EPPO, is really interesting because it would maybe enable us to go further beyond these obstacles in the different member states. And our convention at the OECD includes a recommendation of 2009 inviting the signing states to develop new mechanisms in order to foster judicial cooperation and in order to be more efficient within these cross-border investigations. So that was my first point. And then now the role of the public prosecutor within these cases. Our assessments at the level of the OECD have confirmed very important points regarding the role of such a prosecutor. The first element, which has also been raised this morning, is the independence. As corruption and fraud are very sensitive fields with consequences at the political level or at the national level, it is of course essential that the prosecutors in charge of these cases wouldn't be under political, economic influence or even influence of third parties. And this is included in our convention in the Article 5. We say that the investigation cannot be influenced by interests, whether these interests would be economic or others, would be from a state or from a third party. We do not give details about the procedure as such, but what is important is the independence of the prosecutors. Second point, if the prosecutors have to be efficient, well, they need information and feedback from the different structures and authorities existing at the national level in order to detect fraud and corruption more efficiently. And I talked earlier about the role of fiscal authorities. We also think that the prosecutors need information from people in charge of alerts when it exists at the national level. Third point, you know it, but we need resource and means for the prosecutors because these cases are really complex, especially at the cross-border level. And if we don't have enough people to deal with these cases, well, there will be a lot of delay in order to process these files and cases, or some files will be abandoned. That's why we think that it's really important at the OECD to give the necessary means and resources to these prosecutors. We talked earlier about the deadlines. Well, there is no mention of it in our convention. There is no precise duration for the prescription, but in cross-border files and cases when a huge investigation is required, well, the prescription and the deadlines should be far enough in order to enable the prosecutors to finish the investigation. A last point now about the judicial competencies. Here within the OECD Convention, we do not deal with this aspect, but in some assessment reports, we saw that if there is a competition between different prosecutors or different authorities, you have to write very clear guidelines in order to know who will be in charge of what and who will deal with the case in the end. So here, what we see is that with a complex case like for international corruption, we need mechanisms fostering judicial cooperation, and the role of the prosecutor is crucial for this type of case if this person receives the necessary resource and means to investigate efficiently. And we think that the prescription shouldn't be an obstacle to this type of cases. I thank you for your attention.
Ja, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Jump into the discussion questions. I would like to invite everybody who is sitting on the walls, come to the table if you want to put a question. According that is the only opportunity to get it translated. We can have statements, questions and answers in Deutsch, in English and Français. The floor is open. Who wants to take the floor for statements or questions? Who will begin? Ole Schmidt, please.
Thank you very much. It has been extremely interesting. And to Renata's remark about the most corruptive country in Europe, I think the competition is rather high. And I think there is a German expression that's das kommt in den besten Familien vor. And we have had a lot of cases in my country as well, and we were all of us very astonished in the end, but it's all over the place. My question is, and reflection is concerning the mutual recognition. I think you all touched upon it, Mr. Tittman, as well. And I think that will be the most problematic issues, because will there be using different investigation methods? Would that be accepted? As we can recall, during this famous case with the commissioner, or the late commissioner, or the last commissioner, wiretapping is not allowed in the whole of Europe. Would that be accepted as an evidence? Will it be accepted that you use different methods and the quality, so to say, concerning the judiciary methods? I have several cases that citizens in my country are calling me, sending me emails, and do something for me. We have had problems in another EU country, and we do not rely upon them. We don't think the judiciary system is accurate enough. And I would like to hear your comments about the investigation methods, about the problems with the mutual recognition, because I think that's at least what I think is one of the core issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ole, for this question. First of all, I think it is important to underline that indeed fraud against the interest or financial interests of the European Union and corruption is not limited to some countries. So we have people all around the world probably who try to do it, and so it is the question how to find the right measures. Okay, who is able to give a comment or an answer? Herr Dittmann, perhaps?
Yes, I'd like to reply to this. The solution, well, I don't have a solution. I'd like to start with saying that. However, as you have rightfully said, it is one of the most delicate problems. And when I have understood correctly what the Commissioner said, the instrument that we will have in about a week, and that we will see in about a week, should guarantee that those evidence collected in one country will be recognized by the courts in another country. This is what I understood, and I think we should interpret what the Commissioner said in this way. Of course, nobody can force a judge to believe something, that's clear. However, this is all about recognizing an element as an admissible evidence. I think I have some doubt which is quite in line with yours. I'm not sure how we will manage to do this. In the past, the Commission always spoke about minimum standards or said that member states should be obliged to respect minimum standards. We understood it in a way, and I think we looked through our own glasses, but we interpreted this in a way that we thought that when in one country only the judge can decide about an order, the other member states would have to accept the same. Of course, maybe it's all about harmonizing, and in some countries we would have to raise the bar with the minimum standards, and we would support that. But if this is leading to forum shopping or to intrusion in private cases and private elements, well, then would be too much. I can't say more to that, but I think that the question you raised is quite important. Many thanks, Mr. Dittmann. Mrs. Weber would like to say something about it.
I think it is fair to admit that we have made some progress in the last several years. If I bear in mind, for example, the regulation on Eurojust and how difficult in Eurojust was even to accept the coordination of the joint investigative teams. Then we moved on another way for the mutual recognition in criminal cases. It created a big turmoil at that time, but nevertheless, we came to the conclusion that, okay, we are member states of the same European Union, so we have to have some confidence in the justice system of each of the member states. And it worked. I personally have seen also some horrible outcomes because of this, because another judge simply simply did not look anymore into the files, just took the decision given in another country. But nevertheless, it was a step in this directive, in this direction of harmonizing our approach to criminal legislation and sanctions. But the truth is that I have an example in my mind, and this is not necessarily a fraud against the EU financial interest, but I think it's more than that because it has a very, very strong moral dimension. Let's remember the situation of 4 colleagues of us in the European Parliament in relation to that Sunday Times, whatever attempt was there. But no, let's look at the outcome. Let's not even look into the substance, who is right, who was wrong, and everything. Just the outcome. It was the same situation for 4 colleagues of us. And we have everything from one extreme to the other. The Spanish colleague, his name was barely mentioned, in fact. He was supported by his political party, and he was never actually held accountable because he had the same discussion, in fact. That was the Spanish. The Slovenian one, he left the parliament, he resigned, but again, nothing happened against him, so probably his political career is over. The Romanian one still is in the parliament, has been under penal investigations at home in Romania for the last 2 years. I have no idea what takes 2 years, but still there. And it's, for the time being, there are no prospects to be decided in a way or in another. And fourth, the Austrian, he was convicted. Now, that's anyway not normal. And morally, it's not okay. We say all the time we represent the European citizens, but then we need to have something that is similar, that is in line. So I do understand that basing only on the national rules, national legislation, is not the appropriate answer. But then, on your very concrete question on accepting the evidence, here we have a problem. Not only because countries have different traditions on looking into the evidence and what is the outcome of not receiving a specific evidence, but also because I was thinking honestly that maybe we can come with criminal procedural regulations on frauds against the EU financial interest, but then also you cannot go into a country with 2 sets of procedures. That is going to be very complicated indeed in the negotiations.
Ja, vielen Dank, Renate. Damit wurde auch nochmal hier deutlich, in welchem...
Thank you very much, Renate. This has made clear how difficult and how sensitive these questions are. First of all, as you had mentioned, Article 86 of the Lisbon Contract, of the Lisbon Agreement, mentions the functional powers of the EPPO, which is the
finanziellen
offenses against the financial interests of the Union. And in the 3rd paragraph, there's also mention of the specifics for the completion of the task according to the procedural rules and the admissibility of proof for the judicial control of EPPO. But this is also about the question that has been addressed by the different speakers and that has been specified here, that there are differences in standards, but we have to define common standards as far as the investigation is concerned and the collection of proof, if it's admissible, and that these investigation results should be shared. And well, will all this collected proof be recognized by all member states? And this is quite an intrusion into the practices on the judicial procedures in the national states. And if then the European level actually demands minimum standards, especially in the German context, at least there will be a discussion and there will be a fear that this might lead to a particular law against fraud, attacking the financial interest of the European Union, which would clearly something to be avoided from the standpoint of the German judiciary. And that leads to the question that Mr. Schmidt has addressed. How will this be seen by the European citizens? Will this be accepted? Because in a penal law and a criminal law procedure, the investigation of the prosecution, the investigation from a different country, will this be accepted, or will there be a certain mistrust if this investigation holds up to the same standards than investigations by the prosecution of the country itself would have been led? And that's where we reach the problem of acceptance. It's not only practical, but there's also the question of the political acceptance. And those who have been busy for a long time with the subject of transnational prosecution also have an eye on Article 86, paragraph 4 of the Lisbon Treaty, that includes the possibility that the powers of the European prosecution, according to the protection of financial interest of the European Union, so that these specific subset could be extended beyond financial interests, extended to the combating first-degree criminal acts. Now we have to look at how far the Commission will go. I certainly doubt that they will go this far after what we've heard from Commissioner Šemeta, especially. And so far it seems to be completely about the protection of the financial interest, what we as ALDE consider necessary, especially inside the Budget Control Committee. We still have some time for a couple of questions and statements, and I would like to invite all of you, even if I might not know all of you, so it would be easier if you introduce yourself before you go.
I am a physicist and European citizen, and I have some questions regarding the European public prosecutor. I think the idea is really interesting, but concretely, what is the relation between this prosecutor and the citizens? Is there a relation between the prosecutor and the other institutions that I could see, Olaf, Eurojust, Europol, and so on? But I'd like to know how the work will be organized and what are the competencies of the public prosecutor regarding the national judicial systems. For instance, if there is a fraud at the European level, but the national justice says there is no fraud at our level, well, what are the competencies and what are the competencies of the European public prosecutor? For instance, if there is a fraud at the European level in one of the member states, but the bank accounts are in Switzerland, which is often the case. So what will be the opportunity for the prosecutor to have an investigation, for example, in Switzerland? Thank you very much.
Who could say something about this? Renate, please.
Bien. Ça, c'est tout dans la proposition de...
Well, it is all included within the proposal of the European Commission that should be adopted next week. We don't know it yet. We have some information, but these questions are really good questions, and I think it will depend on the way the proposal has been done by the Commission, and then it will also depend on the negotiation with the Council and the European Parliament. And I think it's also very interesting, the question and the issue of cooperating with third states, because we have a lot of fraud where we provide financial support also, and it's a very important assistance, a lot of money involved. And I think your other question was really interesting. Is there a link between the citizens and the prosecutor? Well, I don't know what the options of the Commission are, but I think you will get answers within the proposal and during the negotiations, of course.
Thank you very much. Do you want to take the floor?
Yeah, just a very short comment. Of course, the precise answers to the question should be given by the Commission, because we don't know the content of the proposal. We only have some information, some ideas what it could be. But the question which is interlinked with the, which is related to the cooperation of the European Public Prosecutor with the third states, I mean the states which are not EU member states, will be one of the crucial issues, because it will be difficult to see how, for instance, with the EU legislation we could establish the mutual legal assistance mechanisms with the third countries, but with the totally national EU instruments. So we would lead to, I mean, the EPPO will probably need to rely on the conventions which exist in that area. So it's very difficult question, and we will be see that how it will be regulated in a regulation which will be presented next year, next week.
Yeah, perhaps we can get an answer by the representatives of the European Commission, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. First, it's very interesting to hear the questions, because these are all things that we have been discussing over months and months. And about the relation between the public prosecutor and the other institutions. The idea is to have a body which would be, as the Commissioner said, independent, but of course there will have to be exchanges between the other institutions and this body, not in the sense of influencing the investigations, obviously, but in terms of cooperation when it is about the follow-up to the work of the European Public Prosecutor. For example, it will continue to be the task of the Commission to recover the money if a fraud has been detected and has been confirmed in front of the court, to recover the money from the fraudster. And of course, for that we need a close cooperation between the European Public Prosecutor and the institutions. One word also on the question mutual recognition and fundamental rights, and what is the acceptance by the member states. Of course, this is a very crucial issue. If the public prosecutor is to work efficiently, we need some kind of mutual recognition, or in particular of evidence that is being collected in the different member states. Now we need to strike the balance between how much kind of harmonization do we need in order to be able to have this mutual recognition, and what would make what would reduce the efficiency of the public prosecutor. So that will be certainly one central point of the discussion. We of course will propose something, but there will need to be a thorough discussion on this with the other institutions, and that is of course very, very clear to us that this is a very difficult point, but as I said, a very, very important point. So on the relations also with the third countries, exactly, this is again something that we will look at in the proposal, and indeed we will need the member states to help us there. But yeah, I cannot go into more detail at this stage.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I have the next statement or question, please.
Hello, my name's Deborah Newton-Cook. I'm a Brit, a mum, and a European citizen. And I'm also I will be standing as a candidate in the European Parliament elections next year in the East Mids region in the UK. So, firstly, one comment and then a question. The comment concerns what Europe has achieved under the European Arrest Warrant. I mean, we all know there are problems with it, but by and large, it works. And it's a good example of where member states put their heads together and agree on something we can actually deliver for our citizens. At that point, I wonder what our citizens would think if they knew about the scale of this fraud. I mean, 2 billion euros a year in times of austerity, it's outrageous. So my question then is to anybody else who might be a candidate next year, and for those members who are planning to stand, on an Aldi ticket, whichever country you're in, is what would you do? A, to make it known about the problem, and secondly, to publicise as a candidate to the citizens what Europe is actually doing to try and sort the mess out. Thank you.
Okay, Renato.
Well, I guess that in this respect, the countries of the European Union differ very much. There are countries which, or where the discussions on corruption, on legislation, on outcomes, it's every single day and very, very tough. And I said, no matter what the reality is, the perception of the reality is this important. And if I look, for example, into my own country, which is Romania, with this perception of a very corrupt country, and I'm not saying it is not corrupt, I'm only wondering if indeed it is the most corrupted or the second most corrupted. So if I look, we have a very, very high perception of corruption also because we discuss every single day about this. Open any site of a newspaper or television or whatever, you would have very, very tough discussions of this. The truth is that if I look into the legislation of my own country, it is by far tougher than in many, many other European countries. I am submitted to requirements that in other countries, when I talk to my colleague, they said, oh no, but this is not possible. Yes, my dear, it is possible and it should be possible because we as politicians, we should be indeed full transparent and under the scrutiny of our citizens. But the differences are huge. So since I have come in this parliament and discussed with so many colleagues, I have wondered if in some countries the perception, because it's also the index of perception, yeah, the perception is not pretty low in some countries because there is no discussion about how corrupted a country is. But I have every guarantee that in my country, also for the European Parliament elections, the discussions will relate also on the corruption, not so much on the corruption. I would never go home and say, oh yes, we are corrupted, but you know, corruption is also in other countries. That's not my job, to display the fact that something very bad happens in other countries. No, my job is to fight corruption in my own country, is to live better, not me, but all of us, yeah? That's the purpose. So, but here I have no idea how the discussions will take place in other countries. The truth is that, for example, because the Commission is right now working to that survey on the assessing the corruption in the anti-corruption activities in all the member states. And I spoke a little bit with Commissioner Malmström, and I would like to go further in that direction. And the truth is that we need to look not only into the legislations as such, but also what is beyond this, because as I said, there are practices which in some countries are considered traditions, normal, and in some countries are considered to be criminal offenses and very, very tough sanctions. So if we want to have a good outcome of this survey, we need indeed to have the same standards applied to all the countries.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much, Renate, for this example. I can add another example. So in the Cont Committee, one of the members reminded us of a fraud in procurement. I think that was located in Bulgaria when in a public tender procedure some copied via internet the addresses and logos of firms. And I was visiting some German authorities and I was telling this story. And then one official said, you needn't go to Bulgaria for that. We realized one enterprise who used an address in a street, and we only discovered because I'm living in that street, and I knew that it cannot be true. So I think we have to be aware that there are people who try to to misuse EU funds or to try to influence tender processes and so on. And that can happen everywhere, and we want, as a European Parliament, to do what we can to raise awareness and to create an institutional framework which helps to better fight fraud and bribe and to protect better the financial interests. Now we have another person who want to take the floor.
Vielen Dank. Alexander Beer, Land Hessen.
Alexander Beer, I'm from the land of Hessen in Germany. When we see that the victim is the European Union, then I think officials will not have difficulty in constructing an appropriate forum here in Brussels. Mr. Dittmann, how can we prevent creating an organism, an agency that will not lead to the incrimination of European citizens in Brussels, because we do have a high concentration here and we want to avoid creating an incriminating agency here for the citizens at home.
Vorschlag der Kommission lautet.
We'll have a look at the proposal of the Commission. I think, of course, the European federal government will take care and be very careful. But I can also tell you that also in Germany, in many cases, we have local fora as far as adults are concerned, because for young people this is limited. The perpetration, the crime scene and the residence of the person are important. Then, of course, we also have the place where the person is arrested, because there's a difference whether, for example, a drug dealer is arrested in one region rather than another, because this can lead to differences of up to 2 years in the prison sentence. We have to harmonize this further. We are very curious and looking forward to see the fantasy, the creativity the European Commission adopted in developing its draft. We're very curious whether in 2 years, for example, whether there's foreseen that 2 years after the judgment there is a follow-up procedure to see whether the sentence was actually rightful and reasonable. I think this is important as well. But I do think it will be possible to find appropriate solutions, and I cannot say something now. I think the European Commission will have taken into account such problems in their proposal. Thank you very much. There is further time for a last comment. If there's a last comment, is there anybody else?
Das scheint nicht der Fall zu sein.
This doesn't seem the case, so I would like to ask all the panelists whether at the end they would like to make one last comment around a conclusion round. Mr. Sillis, is there a conclusion you would like to make?
You are invited if you like to start. No? Yeah? Okay. Renate?
Well, the only thing I would like to say is that I personally believe in more Europe. So whatever I'm saying here, it's also from this perspective. And in this respect, to come also with a legislation that would be applicable in the same way in all the member states cannot only but be welcome. And I think if we want, this is also a very strong not political but civic dimension, because I truly believe that our citizens, particularly now in times of crisis, of never-ending crisis, they really need to see that we from here we give the right examples, and we no longer tolerate frauds against the European Union. If not, if we don't do this, then they would be definitely entitled to ask, why do we have to contribute to the budget of the European Union if you allow such bad things to happen? So I truly believe this is the appropriate answer, and I hope to go in this direction as fast as possible.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Yes, thank you very much, Zilis.
What I have already said, that the presidency, Lithuanian presidency, is putting the protection of the EU financial interests under the priority in their timing, and we will be dealing with the. And we support the very efforts of the Commission to this direction. We will be dealing with a couple of instruments in that area. It's, as I mentioned, the PIF Directive, and soon the Parliament is ready. We are ready to proceed with the trialogues. We will be dealing with the European Public Prosecutor, that will be adopted next week. And we'll also be dealing with the counterfeiting of euro, that directive, which is also in a way related to the protection of the EU financial interests. So just to say, the presidency is really taking a big attention to this issue, and as I said, it's one of the priorities. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Zillis.
Thank you, Mr. Zillis. A last word from Mr. Wehrle.
So just a couple of words. First, we'd like to thank you on behalf of the OECD for the invitation. And what I would like to say that any additional efforts aim at curbing further fraud and corruption are essential, because it's a widespread phenomenon, and therefore any new efforts aim also at enhancing cooperation between national administration and national authorities are certainly welcome, and they support the efforts of the OECD against corruption. So there are definitely synergies there. Thank you.
Okay. Herr Dittmann, wenn Sie wollen, gerne.
Would you like to add something, Mr. Dittmann? Yes, of course. We're very curious. We're to see how the proposal will look in its form, and my personal point of view is that we're looking forward to this important work, to this important challenge for all of us. We have to take care that everyone is on board. In Germany, the states have to be on board. The syndicates and the unions of lawyers. So I mean, all lawyer organizations, lawyers in itself, and this is a very important point in the road. Thank you all. I think that the ALDE parliamentary group has launched this discussion early at the right time, before the proposal is actually submitted in next week. So we have a good idea of the framework of this proposal. We've been able to get useful information, also according to the PIF Directive and the protection of the financial interests according to criminal law. The Committee for Budget Control, as well as the Committee for Civil Liberties, are taking a leading position here. It's not exactly clear which legal basis will be used, and you've addressed a couple of subjects that are very close to mine, and well, like you said, and we want, Renate, and we want that 28 member states participate, that we act unanimously, because the protection of the financial interests of the European Union is not an abstract subject. It's about the money of the European taxpayers, and it's a situation that in different parts of the European Union is affected by austerity, which also leads to social expenditures, to welfare and different other expenses that have been cut to consolidate the budget. And in that point, if there is a huge amount of money lost to fraud, and if we look at the EU budget, that for the first time in the history of the European Union, that we will have less money than we've had before, because we've gone down to 943 billion euros, so that we have an actual net loss from before, then we can't afford that 400 to 600 million euros a year, as well as VAT fraud in the billions every year. All this money is effectively effectively disappears, and that the people who do this get away with it, then there's something has to be done. Especially also in the framework of what we call globalization, that this will also be globalized. Crime is globalized. And that we, as ALDE, take the point of view that cross borders, that the liberty of movement and work and for all citizens in the European interior market is very important, but also the liberties and the freedom of movement. All of this has economical advantages, legal advantages, but it also has to mean that the prosecution must be able to address and to step up to the globalized nature and international nature of crime without infringing on the established rights of member states. So this has to be the harmony of an efficient procedure on one hand and the respect of the subsidiarity principle on the other hand, as well as the fundamental rights of the citizens. This has been clearly put forward today, and I would like to thank everyone who's participated today. Commissioner Scimitar, who has already left. Also my colleagues, Mr. Skilakakis, Renate, Mr. Zilis, Mr. Wehrle, Mr. Dittmann. I would like to thank all of our panelists, as I've just mentioned, and I would also like the Liebe Committee, especially Dominikas Motas, my co-worker, Brigitte Perret, and by the communication team of the ALDE parliamentary group that have enabled us to be present online for this important discussion, and I would like to thank you all for your active participation in this important debate. And I would like to wish you a nice day. And for those that will be on vacation in the near future, I hope you'll have a nice vacation so that we can address this topic with renewed energy after the summer break. Thank you.